The fluorescent hum of Northwood High's library was a constant low thrum against the pervasive silence, a sound as familiar and inescapable to Ethan Thorne as the scent of old paper and dust that clung to him like a second skin. Here, nestled in the quietest corner, beneath a towering shelf filled with forgotten literary classics, Ethan existed. He was a senior, yet moved through the bustling hallways and vibrant classrooms with the almost supernatural ability of someone truly invisible. Nobody looked his way, nobody spoke his name, and that was precisely how he preferred it, a self-imposed exile from the chaotic social ecosystem of high school. He ate his lunch with meticulous care, unwrapping a homemade sandwich from its perfectly folded wax paper. The bread was whole wheat, the filling modest, usually just turkey and lettuce, a stark contrast to the greasy pizza slices, sugary sodas, and colorful, messy cafeteria trays that defined the noisy, boisterous scene just 100 feet away. He could hear the distant roar of laughter, the clatter of cutlery, the thrumming bass of pop music. But it was all a muffled, indistinct hum, a world away from his sanctuary. Ethan didn't miss it. He preferred the silent companionship of his advanced programming textbooks, their worn covers testifying to countless hours spent deciphering complex algorithms and intricate lines of code. His eyes, though often downcast to avoid unwanted attention, held a quiet, burning intensity when he was immersed in a particularly challenging problem, a flicker of the sharp intellect he so carefully concealed. He meticulously organized his books beside his plate, a silent ritual, a way to fill the quiet spaces around his small, solitary table. The empty chairs were not a testament to his loneliness, but to his deliberate choice, a protective barrier against a world that rarely understood him. One blustery Tuesday afternoon, as the last bell shrieked its release across Northwood High, Ethan found himself walking the familiar route home, his backpack heavy with textbooks and the unspoken anxieties of his solitary existence. The wind whipped at his worn jacket, and he pulled it tighter around himself, his gaze fixed on the cracked pavement. He usually quickened his pace, eager to reach the quiet anonymity of his small apartment. But today, a flash of bright blue caught his eye. A dilapidated skateboard, its vibrant paint chipped and faded, lying on the sidewalk. Beside it, a much younger student, perhaps no older than 10, knelt, his small hands fumbling awkwardly with a loose wheel. The boy, Leo, was clearly frustrated, his face contorted in a silent struggle, fat tears welling in his eyes as he wrestled with a stubborn axle, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The skateboard, old and battered, was clearly cherished, a lifeline for youthful escape, now rendered useless. Ethan paused. His own schedule was tight. His mother would be home soon, and he had promised to start dinner. Chores awaited. Yet, something in the boy's quiet desperation, the almost unbearable weight of his small, silent struggle, resonated deeply with Ethan. He saw a mirror of his own past helplessness, his own quiet battles against things that seemed insurmountable. Ignoring the internal voice that urged him to keep walking, to remain invisible, Ethan shifted his heavy backpack. He knelt beside Leo, his shadow falling gently over the boy's bowed head. "Having some trouble there?" Ethan's voice was a low murmur, unaccustomed to outward warmth, yet imbued with a quiet empathy. Leo flinched, startled, his eyes, wide and tear-filled, darting up to Ethan's face. He quickly scrambled back, clutching his broken skateboard to his chest, wary of the older boy, a common reaction to Ethan's quiet, almost unnerving presence. It's broken," Leo whispered, his voice trembling, a fresh tear escaping and tracing a path down his grubby cheek. I can't fix it. My dad, he's working late and—" He trailed off, his gaze falling back to the faulty wheel, a symbol of his shattered afternoon plans. Ethan offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a rare softening of his usually guarded expression. Without a word, he reached into his backpack, pulling out a small, well-used multi-tool. Its polished metal glinted in the fading afternoon light. His fingers, usually flying across a keyboard with lightning speed, now moved with a surprising, deliberate dexterity. He took the skateboard gently from Leo's hesitant grasp, his movements economical and precise. He examined the wheel, twisted a loose nut, adjusted a slightly bent axle, his brow furrowed in concentration. The work was swift, efficient, a testament to an innate understanding of mechanics and problem-solving, even outside the digital realm. Within moments, the wheel was secure, spinning freely with a satisfying whir. "There you go," Ethan murmured, handing the skateboard back to a bewildered Leo. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one, if you know where to look. Don't let a small hiccup derail your whole ride." He offered a quiet, encouraging nod, a gesture of silent solidarity. Before rising quickly, and with a small, almost imperceptible wave, he was off, quickly disappearing around the corner. Leo stared after him, clutching his now fixed skateboard, a sense of awe and profound gratitude bubbling up inside him, chasing away the earlier tears. Ethan, meanwhile, felt a small, unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest, a fleeting sense of connection in his otherwise solitary world. He arrived home to the cramped, familiar comfort of his small apartment. The air was thick with the scent of his mother's late-night baking. She worked long hours at a local bakery to make ends meet, and the subtle aroma of warm dough was a constant reminder of her tireless efforts. Piles of bills, an ever-present specter, lay neatly stacked on the kitchen counter, a silent testament to the financial tightrope they walked. His mother, always tired but perpetually kind, was in the kitchen, kneading dough with a practiced rhythm. She looked up, offering a weary but loving smile. "Home, sweetie. Long day?" "Just fine, Mom," Ethan replied, his voice soft, shedding his backpack by the door. He quickly retreated to his room, a makeshift sanctuary that consumed most of the small space. It was dominated by a jury-rigged computer setup, an old desktop tower, its fans whirring softly, connected to two mismatched monitors that glowed with a faint, ethereal light in the otherwise dim room. This was his true domain, a world built of logic and code, far removed from the social complexities of Northwood High. He didn't game, didn't browse social media. Instead, he opened complex coding software, lines of intricate self-developed code scrolling across his primary monitor like a secret language. This was his project, his passion, his obsession, an ambitious, groundbreaking algorithm designed to revolutionize digital advertising placements and user engagement. He called it Viridian. It was a system built on a deep understanding of human behavior, an intuitive grasp of digital patterns that he couldn't quite explain, only create. It was designed to predict trends, optimize targeting, and create more meaningful, less intrusive digital experiences. No one outside his immediate family knew about Viridian, and even they didn't fully grasp its profound complexity or its staggering potential. His mother saw it as his computer hobby, a harmless, if slightly eccentric pastime that kept him out of trouble. Ethan kept it a secret, hidden deep within the layers of his quiet life, due to a profound fear of ridicule or misunderstanding. He knew how quickly people dismissed what they didn't comprehend, how readily they mocked what lay outside their conventional understanding. The digital world, in its elegant logic and infinite possibilities, was a refuge from the messy, often cruel realities of his day-to-day life. He tapped a few keys, the soft clicks filling the quiet room. The lines of code shifted, shimmered, a silent testament to his hidden genius, a power simmering just beneath the surface of his unassuming existence, waiting for the inevitable moment when it would be forced into the harsh, unforgiving light. The quiet before the storm. The following Monday dawned with a false sense of normalcy. Ethan navigated the bustling hallways of Northwood High like a ghost, his backpack a familiar weight, his eyes trained on the scuffed linoleum, avoiding all eye contact. He knew the routine, the unspoken rules of his invisibility. But some days the rules were broken, shattered by the cruel whims of those who thrived on power and public humiliation. Mark, the undisputed king of Northwood's social hierarchy and captain of the football team, was a force of nature. His laughter boomed across the cafeteria. His effortless charm masked a predatory cunning. By his side was Brody, his equally obnoxious best friend, a hulking shadow of a boy whose loyalty to Mark was as unwavering as it was unthinking. They moved through the school like apex predators, their presence alone enough to silence conversations and send nervous glances scattering. Mark, with his perfectly coiffed hair and designer clothes, considered Ethan an anachronism, a living, breathing testament to everything he disdained: quiet intelligence, introverted tendencies, and an absolute lack of interest in the social games that defined their world. He had a history of making Ethan's life a living hell, a quiet, insidious campaign of whispered insults and strategically placed trips. This afternoon, however, they craved a grander spectacle. The library, typically Ethan's sanctuary, became their stage. The bell had just rung for lunch, and Ethan, as always, was making his solitary retreat, his textbooks clutched to his chest. He was halfway through the quiet aisles when two figures materialized, blocking his path. Mark, his eyes gleaming with a malicious amusement, and Brody, a wide, brutish grin plastered across his face. "Well, well, well," Mark drawled, his voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of the few other students lingering in the library. "Look what the cat dragged in. If it isn't Ethan Thorne, the resident brainiac." He leaned in, a cloying sweetness in his tone. "Heard you were muttering to yourself again, nerd. Something about recursive functions?" Ethan froze, his heart beginning to thump an erratic rhythm against his ribs. He tried to sidestep them, to disappear, but Brody's arm, thick and unyielding, blocked his escape. "Just leave me alone, Mark," Ethan mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed on a point beyond Mark's shoulder. Mark's grin widened, a predatory flash of teeth. "Oh, but we just want to understand your genius, Ethan. For science, you know." Before Ethan could react, Mark snatched his old battered phone from his hand. Ethan instinctively reached for it, but Brody shoved him back, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make him stumble, sending his meticulously arranged textbooks scattering across the polished floor. "Tell us, genius," Mark continued, turning the phone's camera on Ethan, "what profound thoughts are brewing in that big brain of yours? Come on, share with the class." Caught off guard, disoriented by the sudden confrontation, and with the phone's camera thrust into his face, Ethan tried to explain his thoughts, his mind still reeling from the unexpected ambush. He stammered, grappling for words, trying to articulate the complex concepts that filled his mind. The recursive function within the neural net, it optimizes for perceptual bias. You see, if the data streams are asymmetrical, then the deep learning model, it creates a feedback loop of cognitive dissonance. You have to prune the irrelevant nodes, or it just bubbles over. His words tumbled out, incoherent fragments of technical jargon, a desperate attempt to make sense of the intrusion, to explain his world to those who could never understand. He gestured vaguely with his hands, his eyes wide, lost in the abstract landscape of his thoughts. Mark and Brody exchanged a glance, their eyes alight with malicious glee. They let him babble, recording every awkward pause, every misspoken word, every nervous tick. When Ethan finally trailed off, his face flushed with confusion and humiliation, Mark gave a theatrical sigh. "Fascinating, Ethan, truly. But I think you're missing something." Just then, Brody appeared with a cafeteria tray, seemingly out of nowhere. Before Ethan could react, Mark nodded to Brody, who, with a swift, deliberate movement, upended the tray. A cascade of lukewarm spaghetti, congealed cheese sauce, and soggy tater tots cascaded over Ethan, drenching his clothes, staining his precious textbooks, and splattering across the library floor. The stench of stale food filled the air. A few students in the vicinity snickered, quickly stifling their laughter as the librarian, a stern woman with a perpetually disapproving frown, began to stride towards them. Mark and Brody, their mission accomplished, vanished with practiced speed, disappearing around a bookshelf, their laughter echoing faintly. Ethan stood there, dripping, his clothes plastered to his skin, the warmth of the food slowly turning cold, a viscous, humiliating film. He was utterly, devastatingly mortified. He watched, helpless, as Mark, now safely out of the librarian's sight, uploaded the video to Northwood Pulse, the school's most popular social media platform. He saw the title flash across the screen of Mark's phone: "Nerd rants about nothing while eating lunch," followed by a string of humiliating hashtags: Brainiac Breakdown, Northwood weirdo. Spaghetti shower. Within minutes, the comment section exploded. LOL, what even is he talking about? Dude's a total alien. Did he just get slimed? Memes of his confused, food-covered face began to circulate. Each notification, each new comment, each shared laugh felt like a physical blow. He felt the suffocating weight of every derisive chuckle, every whispered comment that seemed to follow him like a noxious cloud. He stumbled home, barely aware of the curious glances, the pitying stares. His first instinct was to delete his social media accounts, to erase his digital footprint, to disappear entirely. He wanted to curl into a ball and simply cease to exist. As the initial shock and humiliation began to subside, replaced by the gnawing ache of cold spaghetti and deeper despair, a different emotion began to stir within Ethan, a fierce, burning indignation. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the violation of his intellectual space, the mocking of his passion, and the insidious nature of their cruelty. He remembered his father, a quiet academic who, despite his brilliance, had often been dismissed or ridiculed by those who preferred superficiality. The greatest power lies in quiet conviction, Ethan, his father had often told him, his voice calm and steady. Let your work speak for itself. True understanding is its own reward, and true ignorance its own punishment. The memory ignited a spark. The video gained traction rapidly, leaking beyond the school walls and reaching local news outlets as a viral bullying incident. The headlines screamed, "Northwood High bullying caught on camera." "Teens humiliation goes viral." Northwood High, desperate to save face, announced a strict zero-tolerance policy for cyberbullying and formed an internal disciplinary committee. Mark and Brody, though outwardly unfazed, were now the public face of a national controversy. Their faces splashed across local news channels, albeit blurred. They were seen as the perpetrators, the instigators of a vile act. Ethan realized he could no longer simply endure. This wasn't just about his personal embarrassment. It was about the wider issue of bullying, the abuse of digital platforms, and the urgent need for accountability. He knew he couldn't go back to being invisible. The relentless stream of notifications on his phone, the knowing glances in the hallway, the sheer scale of the public humiliation. It all compelled him towards a confrontation, one he never would have sought, one he had always desperately avoided, but now he couldn't avoid. The initial spark of indignation had grown into a quiet resolve. His world had been irrevocably shattered, and the broken pieces now demanded to be put back together, not silently, but with a resounding truth. The point of no return had been reached. The principal's office, usually a sterile testament to order and authority, crackled with an almost palpable tension. The polished mahogany desk, normally a barrier of power, now seemed to absorb the fraught emotions emanating from the assembled parties. Mr. Harrison, Northwood High's principal, a man whose tailored suits and carefully constructed calm usually conveyed an unshakable control, sat at its head. His brow was furrowed with a mixture of exasperation and political calculation. He was less concerned with justice and more with containing a scandal that threatened to tarnish his school's pristine image. Across from him, arranged like opposing armies, sat the two factions. On one side, radiating an almost arrogant confidence, were Mark and Brody. Mark, his golden hair meticulously combed, wore a facade of injured innocence. Beside him, Brody, a silent, imposing hulk, merely smirked, his eyes darting between Ethan and the principal with thinly veiled amusement. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, a powerful, impeccably dressed couple, sat ramrod straight, their faces a mask of righteous indignation. Mr. Thorne, a prominent local businessman with deep ties to the school board, exuded an air of entitlement. He considered this entire disciplinary hearing a laughable inconvenience, a minor skirmish in his carefully orchestrated life. He had already briefed his lawyer, a sharp-suited man with a perpetually bored expression, who sat quietly, occasionally interjecting with clipped legal jargon that seemed to automatically dismiss any notion of their son's culpability. On the other side, shrinking slightly in the oversized visitor's chair, was Ethan Thorne. He clutched his worn backpack, its straps digging into his shoulders as if seeking comfort from the familiar weight. His mother, a woman etched with the lines of worry and hard work, sat beside him, her hand occasionally reaching out to offer a comforting, if trembling, squeeze to his arm. She felt a crushing sense of helplessness, adrift in a world of legal threats and accusations she barely understood. The only other person present, quiet and observant in a corner chair, was Ms. Albright, Ethan's introverted, highly respected computer science teacher. Her glasses perched on her nose, she watched the proceedings with a keen, almost microscopic intensity, her usually reserved demeanor betraying a subtle current of apprehension. She had always seen Ethan's quiet brilliance, a light that shone far brighter than any of her other students, but she rarely intervened, preferring to nurture talent from a distance. Today, however, her presence felt like a silent act of solidarity. "Mr. Miller," Principal Harrison began, his voice a carefully modulated tone of weary authority, addressing Ethan. "We understand your distress. Cyberbullying is a serious matter. However, Mark and Brody have presented a counter-argument." He gestured towards Mr. Thorne, who gave a brief, dismissive nod. "Indeed, Principal Harrison," Mr. Thorne interjected, his voice smooth and condescending. "My son and young Brody here maintain this was nothing more than a harmless prank. Teenagers, you know, high spirits, a bit of clumsy fun. The video, as presented by this young man, is, shall we say, a gross misrepresentation." He gestured vaguely at Ethan with a manicured hand as if swatting away a fly. Mark then took out his phone, a sleek, expensive model, and projected a version of the infamous video onto the principal's large wall-mounted monitor. This was not the raw, chaotic footage Ethan remembered. It was heavily edited, professionally cut. Ethan's incoherent babbling was muted, replaced by a bouncy, innocuous soundtrack. The spaghetti dump was edited down to a quick, almost comical splash, framed to look like a clumsy accident. The lingering humiliation was gone, replaced by a manufactured, light-hearted prank. It was a masterpiece of digital manipulation, designed to minimize their actions and paint Ethan as overly sensitive, perhaps even dramatic. "As you can see, Principal," Mark said, his voice oozing sincerity, though his eyes held a triumphant glint. "It was just a joke, a bit of fun. He looked like he was having a good time even. We didn't mean any harm." Brody snickered, earning a sharp look from his father. Ethan felt a surge of familiar helplessness. His heart pounded, his palms grew slick. He knew what they had done, could see the precise cuts, the subtle fades, the way the audio had been doctored. But how could he explain it? How could he, a quiet, awkward teenager, counter such polished professional deception? He struggled to articulate his case, his words catching in his throat. But they cut out. And the audio, it's not what happened. They twisted it. They mocked my passion. His voice was reedy, desperate, losing ground against their confident assertions and the lawyer's silent, intimidating presence. He felt his mother's hand tighten on his arm, a silent plea for him to somehow prevail. "Passion?" Mr. Thorne scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. "It sounded like gibberish, young man. Perhaps you should stick to what you understand, instead of making wild accusations." His lawyer nodded in agreement. Mr. Harrison sighed, a clear sign of his dwindling patience. "Ethan, while I appreciate your perspective, we need concrete evidence. This edited video, it appears innocuous." He leaned back in his chair, clearly ready to conclude the hearing with a mild reprimand for the bullies and a stern warning to Ethan. It was in that moment, as the suffocating weight of their smug dismissal pressed down on him, that something snapped within Ethan. A spark, ignited by desperation and a sudden, fierce defiance, flared into a controlled fire. This wasn't just about the video anymore. It was about the insidious power of manipulation, the way truth could be warped, and how his very identity, his deep-seated passion, was being ridiculed and invalidated. He remembered the thrill of the code, the certainty of logic. He remembered Leo's broken skateboard, and the quiet satisfaction of fixing something that was deemed irreparable. "It's not innocuous," Ethan said. His voice, though still quiet, now held a new, steely edge, surprising even himself. He reached for the principal's laptop, which sat open on the desk, connected to the large monitor for presentations. Mr. Harrison, startled by Ethan's sudden boldness, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. Ethan's fingers, which moments before had been trembling, now moved with an almost ethereal speed across the keyboard. He didn't just project the original unedited video. That would be too simple, too easily dismissed as a he said, she said. Instead, with a series of lightning-fast commands, his fingers dancing across the keys, he activated an unseen layer of code, a module he had secretly developed for Viridian. It was designed for deep-level digital forensics, a tool born from his relentless pursuit of pattern recognition and anomaly detection. The screen shimmered. Then, to the astonishment of everyone in the room, the video began to play. But it wasn't just the raw footage. Overlaying it was a dazzling, complex visual analysis. Subtle, shimmering red lines appeared at every cut, every splice, every digital manipulation. Timestamps flashed, highlighting the exact microseconds where frames were removed or inserted. A new audio track, stripped of its cheerful music, played Ethan's own stammering, desperate words, but also, almost imperceptibly at first, revealed faint, distant echoes of Mark's and Brody's whispered insults and cruel snickers that had been digitally scrubbed from the edited version. Then, in a truly breathtaking display, the system began to project a visual representation of the audio waveforms, clearly showing where Mark had digitally lowered the volume on his own mocking laughter and boosted Ethan's confused babbling. The screen glowed with a complex yet astonishingly clear analysis of the video's digital footprint, revealing the deliberate, malicious nature of their deception. It was irrefutable proof, laid bare in lines of light and logic. The room collectively gasped, a single shocked exhalation. Only Mr. Harrison and Ms. Albright truly comprehended the full scope of what they were witnessing. Mr. Harrison's expression, initially bewildered, then shifted to one of profound shock and dawning understanding. His jaw slackened, and he leaned forward, his eyes glued to the screen. He had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just a video player, it was an intelligence, an accusation rendered in pure, undeniable data. Ms. Albright's eyes, however, gleamed with a mixture of immense pride and utter awe. She instantly recognized the sophistication of Ethan's unique, self-developed algorithm. The elegance of the code, the sheer intuitive brilliance required to create such a real-time forensic analysis tool was far beyond anything she had taught him, far beyond anything any high school student, or even many professionals, could have conceived. She saw not just a student, but a prodigy, a true visionary whose talent had been hidden, neglected, and now, finally, revealed. Mark and Brody, along with their parents, were completely blindsided, their smug expressions contorted into faces of disbelief, then raw, sputtering rage. "That's a fake! He's hacking!" Mark shrieked, his voice cracking, his face turning an angry shade of scarlet. He surged forward, trying to deny the undeniable evidence flashing on the screen. "He's just making it up. It's a trick." Brody, meanwhile, lunged for the laptop, his brutish instincts taking over, attempting to snatch it and silence the damning evidence. But Ethan, with a surprising agility born of sudden adrenaline, instinctively pulled the device back, just out of his reach. Mr. Thorne, seeing his carefully constructed narrative crumble, immediately tried to discredit Ethan's abilities. "This is outrageous. This is nothing but nerd tricks, unauthorized hacking. You're violating school policy, young man, using such sophisticated, potentially invasive technology." He slammed his fist on the table. His lawyer, though visibly shaken by the unforeseen display, quickly recovered, launching into a furious legal tirade about unauthorized access and digital espionage. Principal Harrison, though visibly impressed, felt a surge of unease. He realized the terrifying depth of Ethan's skill, a power that could expose anything, anyone. But he also understood the political fallout, the immense pressure from Mr. Thorne, who was already threatening lawsuits and pulling strings on the school board. He had a choice to make: uphold justice or protect the school's precarious peace. He knew, with a sinking feeling, that Mr. Thorne would not let this go. The unveiling had happened, but the battle was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The air in the Northwood High Auditorium crackled with an unusual, almost tangible energy, far removed from the typical buzz of teenage excitement. Today was the annual Innovate-a-thon competition, an event usually relegated to a niche interest, a showcase for the school's quieter, academically inclined students. But this year, a palpable tension hung in the cavernous space, a sense of anticipation tinged with a cruel, almost gladiatorial undercurrent. Mark and Brody, alongside Mr. Thorne, had skillfully manipulated the school board, leveraging Mr. Thorne's considerable influence and veiled threats of legal action to mandate a public demonstration by Ethan. It was to be a showcase not of innovation, but of humiliation, a public trial masquerading as a technological exhibition. The grand stage, usually adorned with hopeful student projects, now felt like an execution block, a symbolic arena where Ethan, the quiet nerd, was forced to defend his talent against the very people who had tirelessly mocked him. Ethan stood alone on that brightly lit stage, the harsh glare of the spotlights doing little to warm the chill that permeated his bones. His usual faded hoodie and worn jeans seemed painfully out of place against the gleaming, professional-grade equipment that had been set up for his demonstration. The auditorium was packed, far more so than for any previous Innovate-A-thon. Every seat was filled, and students lined the walls, craning their necks for a better view. Teachers, usually bustling with their own concerns, sat rigid in their seats, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and a few, even pity. His mother, a tiny, resolute figure in the third row, offered a trembling, encouraging smile, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But her presence, while comforting, couldn't shield him from the overwhelming sense of isolation. Miss Albright, his computer science teacher, sat a few rows behind, her gaze fixed on him with a worried intensity, a silent wellspring of support that couldn't directly intervene. He saw Principal Harrison on the judging panel, his face carefully neutral, yet his eyes betrayed a nervous flicker. And then there was Mr. Thorne, Mark's father, the Type A antagonist, sitting at the head of the judging table like a Roman emperor, his expensive suit impeccable, his smile a chilling, predatory curve. He was the architect of this public spectacle, driven by a desperate need to salvage his family's reputation and to crush anyone who dared to expose his secrets. He saw Ethan not just as a threat to his son's popularity, but as a direct challenge to his own carefully constructed empire of power and influence. Ethan scanned the crowd, feeling the chilling weight of expectation, the collective anticipation of his supposed downfall. His former friends, sensing the danger, avoided him, their eyes quickly darting away if their gazes accidentally met his. He felt the crushing pressure to perform under hostile scrutiny, to defend not just his code, but his very integrity, his passion, and his identity. He wasn't just demonstrating an algorithm, he was defending his right to exist, unmolested, in a world that seemed determined to flatten him. And now, Principal Harrison announced, his voice booming slightly over the loudspeakers, we have our final demonstration of the day. Ethan Miller will be presenting his unique video analysis tool. There was a subtle hesitation in his voice, a faint undercurrent of doubt. As per a recent mandate from the school board, and in the interest of full transparency regarding previous disciplinary matters, Mr. Miller will be required to perform a live, on-the-spot demonstration of his software's capabilities using a pre-selected video feed. A collective murmur rippled through the audience. A live demo was unprecedented for the Innovate-a-thon. This wasn't a casual exhibition, it was an interrogation. Mr. Thorne leaned forward, his voice cutting through the hum, deceptively cordial. Indeed, Mr. Miller, your fascinating display in the principal's office raised some questions. Some suggested it was merely a pre-programmed trick, not true on-the-fly analysis. So to alleviate any doubts, we've prepared a little challenge for you. He gestured towards the massive projection screen behind Ethan. We've taken a public domain video feed, a real-time traffic camera from a busy city intersection, just outside our jurisdiction. It's notoriously grainy, prone to glitches, and often suffers from interference. Your task, Mr. Miller, is to publicly optimize this live, complex, and intentionally flawed public domain video feed within a ridiculously short, almost impossible time frame. 5 minutes to be precise. You must use only your live coding skills, and your code must be projected onto the main screen for all to see. If you fail to clearly demonstrate your optimization, that is, to fix the flaws, improve clarity, or extract specific, verifiable data points, then your previous claims will be declared a hoax, and you will face severe academic penalties, including suspension and a permanent mark on your record. The words hung in the air, cold and definitive. 5 minutes. It was an impossible demand, designed for failure. Mark and Brody, sitting in the front row, exchanged triumphant smirks, their eyes glinting with malicious anticipation. They knew this was a setup, designed to expose Ethan as a fraud on the grandest stage. Ethan felt a jolt of ice water through his veins. 5 minutes for a real-time live code demonstration on a deliberately corrupted feed? It was an unfair, brutal test. His mind raced, calculating the sheer complexity of the task. He would have to access the live stream, write a custom module to clean the noise, another to enhance the resolution, and then somehow extract meaning from the chaotic data, all while typing under the intense scrutiny of hundreds of eyes, with his code laid bare for everyone, even his enemies, to scrutinize. The school's technical director, a nervous, sweating man, stepped forward and activated the feed. The massive screen behind Ethan flickered to life, displaying a chaotic, pixelated mess. It was indeed a live traffic camera, but the image was so blurry, so riddled with static and distortion, that it was almost impossible to discern vehicles, let alone license plates or faces. The feed periodically froze, stuttered, and then dissolved into a shower of green and purple pixels before returning, slightly worse than before. "Timer starts now!" Mr. Harrison's voice sliced through the silence, and a large, red digital clock appeared on the screen, prominently displaying 005 hour. Its relentless ticking amplified the tension in the room, each click a hammer blow against Ethan's already racing heart. Ethan's hands, which had been clammy and stiff, hovered over the keyboard. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic thrum of his pulse. He could feel the eyes of every single person in the auditorium boring into him, judging him, waiting for him to break. He could hear the faint, mocking whispers from the front row where Mark and Brody sat, their confidence radiating off them in waves. He thought of his father's quiet conviction, his mother's tired sacrifices. He thought of Leo and his broken skateboard, and the simple satisfaction of solving a problem for someone else. He thought of Ms. Albright, whose steady gaze was the only friendly face in the sea of spectators. And then he thought of Viridian. His project, his secret world. This wasn't just a test of his coding skills. It was a test of his courage, of his belief in the very logic and truth that Viridian represented. This was a crucible. His fingers, initially trembling, found their rhythm. The anxiety, the fear, the crushing pressure, it all began to recede, replaced by the cool, comforting logic of code. He began to type, swiftly, efficiently. Lines of Python and C++ scrolled rapidly across the projected screen, a mesmerizing cascade of characters. He accessed the video stream, initiating a series of pre-built modules from Viridian, adapting them on the fly. He began with noise reduction. The pixelated chaos on the screen slowly began to coalesce, the static lessening, the colors becoming more defined. Then came the resolution enhancement. The blurry shapes began to sharpen, transforming from indistinct blobs into recognizable cars and people. He wasn't just filtering, he was rebuilding the image, extrapolating missing data points with an almost prescient accuracy. 00330. The timer flashed, its glow accusatory. Mark scoffed loudly from the audience. "He's just running a filter. My phone can do that." But Ethan wasn't just running filters. He was crafting bespoke solutions, lines of code appearing as quickly as he could think them, each one a brushstroke on a digital canvas. He focused on a specific, recurring anomaly in the top right corner of the feed, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker that appeared every few seconds, barely noticeable amidst the general distortion. It wasn't random noise. It was a pattern. And patterns to Ethan were the language of truth. He isolated the anomaly, writing a custom subroutine. His mind was a whirlwind of variables, functions, and loops, yet his hands moved with an almost dreamlike fluidity. He was in the zone, lost in the intricate dance of logic. The entire auditorium, the judgmental stares, the ticking clock, fading into a distant hum. He applied a specifically designed Viridian module, one he had created to detect and analyze signals intended to obscure or jam other signals. As the timer blinked, 0010, the flicker intensified on the screen, then sharpened. It transformed. What was once random noise became a clear, albeit brief flash of a hidden security camera's lens, its feed being deliberately jammed and obscured. The code then initiated a frequency analysis, identifying the specific radio frequency being used to jam the camera. This wasn't just accidental interference. It was intentional, a sophisticated electronic countermeasure. "Time!" Principal Harrison declared, his voice tight with a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. The screen froze, displaying 111 in an unblinking red. Ethan's final line of code hung on the screen, uncompiled. A collective groan of disappointment, mixed with a few triumphant snickers, rippled through the audience. "He failed," Mark crowed, leaping to his feet, a triumphant sneer splitting his face. "Told you it was a hoax. My dad's always right." Mr. Thorne began to rise, a predatory smile forming on his lips, ready to declare Ethan's defeat, ready to deliver the final, crushing blow to his credibility. The lawyer beside him began to pull out a prepared statement, a legal death sentence for Ethan's academic career. But just as Mr. Thorne's smile reached its full, venomous bloom, just as the lawyer's voice prepared to unleash its pronouncement, the screen snapped to life. The processing message that had briefly flickered after Ethan's last key press had vanished. The traffic camera footage, which moments before had been a static, grainy image, now shimmered, resolving into a breathtakingly clear, high-definition video. Every car, every pedestrian, every architectural detail was rendered with astonishing precision. Then, the true revelation. Overlaying the enhanced video was a newly generated, detailed analysis. A perfectly mapped, high-resolution rendering of the building's exterior, adjacent to the traffic camera's view, appeared. It highlighted, with pinpoint accuracy, the exact location and type of the hidden jamming device that had been disrupting the feed. And then, the ultimate terrifying proof. Ethan's Viridian code, operating on an adaptive learning framework, had not only identified but neutralized the jamming frequency. The screen now displayed a clear, unbroken live feed from the hidden camera, positioned discreetly on the building. The image that filled the auditorium with its stark clarity sent a shockwave through the room. On the hidden camera feed, a series of encrypted data packets, clearly marked with a distinctive corporate logo, were being illegally transferred from the building, right under the nose of the city's standard surveillance systems. The logo was unmistakable, the stylized T and S of Thorne Security Solutions, Mr. Thorne's own company. The auditorium erupted in stunned silence. Mark and Brody's faces drained of color, their triumphant sneers replaced by utter horror, their mouths agape. They looked at the screen, then at their father, then back at the screen, as if trapped in a nightmare. Mr. Thorne, who ran the very private security firm now exposed, visibly flinched. His face turned ashen, his jaw muscles clenching, as his illicit activities, a massive, intricate data espionage network, were unwittingly exposed on the huge screen for all to see. The digital evidence of his corporate malfeasance, his long-running, extensive illegal data trafficking, laid bare by a nerd he had sought to destroy. Lieutenant Davies, the local police chief, a Type B antagonist driven by a rigid adherence to traditional policing methods and an arrogant dismissal of anything outside his purview, had been present as a VIP judge, initially scoffing at the notion of a kid's code solving anything. He rose slowly, his mouth agape, his earlier dismissive attitude replaced by dawning comprehension, then immediate, decisive action. His eyes, initially clouded with skepticism, now snapped into sharp focus. He recognized the significance of the corporate logo, the implications of illegal data transfer. "Freeze that image!" he barked into his radio, his voice echoing through the stunned hall, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Secure the building immediately. This is an active crime scene. Thorne Security Solutions. Get a warrant ready. Now!" The crowd, initially a silent, bewildered mass, unsure of what they were witnessing, now erupted into thunderous applause, a wave of collective realization washing over them. They didn't just see a nerd demonstrating code. They saw a genius, a quiet hero who had exposed a massive criminal operation right before their eyes. The rhythmic clapping swelled into a roaring ovation, a spontaneous outpouring of admiration and awe. Ethan stood there, blinking in the sudden explosion of light and sound, the weight of the moment crashing over him. He had not just passed the test, he had fundamentally changed the game. His vindication was not just personal, it was public, undeniable, and universally acknowledged. The Bullies' plan had backfired spectacularly, and in their attempt to ruin his life, they had irrevocably ruined their own. The raw, undeniable power of truth, meticulously extracted from the digital ether, had finally broken through the carefully constructed facade of lies. The rhythmic, ominous ticking of the timer had ceased, its red digits frozen at 000. Yet the silence that followed was not one of conclusion, but of suspended animation. The entire auditorium, a moment ago a cacophony of nervous coughs and whispered doubts, was now utterly silent, save for the distant faint siren of an approaching police car, already responding to Lieutenant Davies's urgent call. Every eye, every breath, was fixed on the massive screen behind Ethan. Ethan stood bathed in the harsh glow of the projector, a solitary figure amidst the swirling emotions. His face, still pale from the ordeal, held a newfound stillness, an almost serene focus. His hands, which had flown across the keyboard with such frantic grace, now rested lightly on the laptop, their tremors entirely gone. Lines of complex, self-developed code, initially appearing as an inscrutable alien language to the untrained eye, still scrolled faintly in the background of the projection, a testament to the digital ballet he had just performed. The screen flickered. The initial grainy traffic camera footage, which had been the source of the insidious jamming, had been utterly transformed. It was no longer a blurry, distorted mess, but a breathtakingly clear, high-definition video feed. Every vehicle was sharply defined, every pedestrian's face discernible, the precise weave of their clothing almost visible. The building that had served as the source of the interference now stood out with crystal clarity, its architectural details suddenly stark and undeniable. Then, the true genius of Ethan's Viridian system unfurled. Overlaying the enhanced video, a sophisticated graphical analysis blossomed. A perfectly mapped, high-resolution rendering of the building's exterior materialized, highlighting with pinpoint accuracy a small, almost invisible vent near the rooftop. Within that vent, shimmering with an unholy red glow, was the exact location and detailed schematic of the hidden jamming device, a compact, custom-built electromagnetic disruptor, specifically designed to mask specific digital frequencies. It was not mere interference. It was a deliberate, sophisticated piece of espionage equipment. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, a few muttered exclamations of "impossible" and "how did he?" escaped hushed lips. But the bated breath moment was yet to come. As the timer had hit 0, and just as Mark's triumphant sneer had begun to spread, and Mr. Thorne had begun to rise, the screen momentarily flashed "processing." The very last line of Ethan's compiled code, the culmination of his 5-minute sprint, executed. His Viridian system, operating on an adaptive learning framework he had built from scratch, had not only identified and neutralized the jamming frequency, but had simultaneously established a direct, secure connection to the now unjammed feed. The screen snapped to life, not just with the clear traffic camera, but with a second, smaller window appearing in the corner, showing a clear, unbroken live feed from the hidden camera within the building itself. And what it showed sent a chilling wave of recognition through the stunned spectators. The feed displayed a dimly lit room filled with banks of servers. 2 men, their faces obscured by the angle but their uniforms clearly visible, were meticulously transferring large, encrypted data packets from a secure server to an external hard drive. The corporate logo, emblazoned on their uniforms and on the data packets, was unmistakable, gleaming mockingly in the low light. The stylized T and S of Thorne Security Solutions, Mr. Thorne's own highly reputable private security firm. The sheer audacity of it, the cold, undeniable proof, hung in the air like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a simple jammer. This was a sophisticated, organized, and illegal data transfer operation, running right under the city's nose, masterminded by one of its most respected businessmen. Mark and Brody's faces, a moment ago contorted in triumphant smirks, now drained of all color. Their eyes, wide with utter horror, darted from the screen to their father, then back to the screen, as if trapped in a nightmarish loop. Mark's jaw hung slack, his meticulously styled hair suddenly seemed to droop, and Brody, the silent enforcer, actually recoiled, a low, guttural sound escaping his throat. The realization of the enormity of what had just been exposed, and their father's central role in it, hit them like a physical blow. Their smug, privileged world was crumbling before their eyes, exposed by the very nerd they had sought to humiliate. Mr. Thorne, the Type A antagonist, whose carefully constructed facade of respectability had been his armor, visibly flinched. His perfectly composed face turned an ashen gray, his jaw muscles clenching so hard that a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. His initial predatory smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. He knew what Viridian had done. He knew that the unblinking eye of the public was now seeing the truth of his long-running, extensive illegal data trafficking and espionage network, which had used his security firm as a front, all laid bare by a high school student. He began to stammer, This is a fabrication, a hack. He's infringing on private property." But his words were weak, desperate, drowning in the undeniable visual proof. Lieutenant Davies, the local police chief, a Type B antagonist, whose initial posture had been one of dismissive arrogance, believing only in traditional, brute force policing methods, had watched Ethan's demonstration with a skeptical, almost bored air. He had initially seen Ethan's coding as little more than a clever parlor trick, easily dismissed. But as the image of the hidden camera feed, displaying the Thorne Security Solutions logo and the illegal data transfer, solidified on the screen, his entire demeanor shifted. His eyes, which had been clouded with prejudice, now snapped into sharp, decisive focus. He rose slowly from his seat, his mouth agape, his earlier skepticism transforming into awe, then immediate, instinctual, and utterly decisive action. He was a man of the law, and what he saw was undeniable crime. "Freeze that image!" he barked into his radio, his voice echoing through the stunned hall, cutting through the silence like a knife. He wasn't speaking to the school staff. He was speaking to his police force. "Secure the building immediately. I repeat, secure the building at the intersection of Elm and 4th. This is an active crime scene. Thorne Security Solutions, get a warrant ready. Now. And get a forensics team over here. Now." His voice, usually gruff and authoritarian, now vibrated with a newfound urgency and respect for the digital evidence unfolding before him. The crowd, which moments before had been a silent, bewildered mass, unsure of what they were witnessing, now erupted into a thunderous, collective roar of applause. It started as a ripple, a few scattered claps, then swelled into a tidal wave of spontaneous, heartfelt admiration. They didn't just see a nerd demonstrating code. They saw a genius, a quiet hero who had exposed a massive criminal operation right before their eyes. Their faces, a panorama of initial skepticism, transformed into expressions of pure astonishment, then evolved into a collective understanding, and finally burst into unbridled awe and fervent admiration. People were on their feet, cheering, whistling, clapping, their faces alight with a mixture of shock and profound respect. They had witnessed not just a technological feat, but a public vindication, a moment of profound justice delivered by the most unlikely of heroes. Ethan stood there, blinking in the sudden explosion of light and sound. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of his usual existence. He felt a wave of dizzying relief, a profound sense of catharsis washing over him. The humiliation, the fear, the years of invisibility, it all receded, replaced by the overwhelming, exhilarating sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. He had not just passed the test, he had fundamentally changed the game. His vindication was not just personal, it was public, undeniable, and universally acknowledged. The bullies' meticulous plan to ruin his life had backfired spectacularly, and in their attempt to silence him, they had irrevocably and spectacularly ruined their own. The raw, undeniable power of truth, meticulously extracted from the digital ether, had finally broken through the carefully constructed facade of lies, illuminating everything in its path. the aftermath of Ethan's revelation was swift, brutal, and profoundly satisfying. The thunderous applause of the Innovate-a-thon faded into the sharp official tones of police radios and the urgent footsteps of investigators. The truth, once confined to the hidden depths of digital code, had exploded into the glaring light of public scrutiny, leaving a trail of ruined reputations in its wake. Detective Thorne, once the epitome of local business success and civic pride, stood on the stage, his face still an ashen mask of disbelief and terror. The live video evidence projected for all to see, combined with Ethan's meticulous analysis of the jamming device and the discovered encrypted data packets, provided irrefutable proof of his long-running, extensive illegal data trafficking and espionage network. It was an operation that had used his legitimate security firm, Thorne Security Solutions, as a sophisticated front, siphoning off sensitive data, manipulating markets, and engaging in corporate espionage for years. Lieutenant Davies, now standing beside him, a stark contrast in his official uniform, personally read him his rights. Mr. Thorne was immediately handcuffed, his powerful hands now shackled, stripped of all authority. He lost everything: his carefully cultivated reputation, his multi-million-dollar company which was instantly seized and investigated, his vast fortune, his freedom, and his family name was forever tarnished, a byword for corporate corruption and deceit. The fall was absolute, a direct, undeniable consequence of his greed and the malicious arrogance that had led him to underestimate Ethan. Mark and Brody, caught in the brutal fallout of their father's empire, faced immediate and severe legal consequences. The investigation quickly revealed their lesser but still incriminating roles in aiding and abetting their father's activities, often acting as unwitting couriers or providing distractions for his illicit operations. The cyberbullying video, once their weapon, now served as a damning piece of evidence, demonstrating their malicious intent and adding to the stack of charges against them. Their once unquestioned popularity vanished overnight. The social lives ruined was an understatement. They became instant pariahs, their names synonymous with scandal and betrayal. Faced with ostracization, legal battles, and the profound shame of their father's crimes, their future prospects shattered, their youthful arrogance replaced by a crushing realization of the irreversible damage they had wrought upon themselves and their family. They were forced to transfer schools, their once bright futures irrevocably dimmed. Lieutenant Davies, the local police chief, a Type B antagonist, had initially approached the situation with a rigid adherence to traditional policing methods, dismissing Ethan's technical prowess as irrelevant to real police work. He had been arrogant, skeptical, and frankly, dismissive of a nerd from the local high school. But witnessing the live exposure of Thorne's deep-seated corruption, and seeing how Ethan's cutting-edge algorithms had provided the irrefutable evidence that traditional methods might have missed for years, fundamentally shifted his perspective. Humbled and profoundly shocked by the extent of Thorne's deceit and his own misjudgment, Lieutenant Davies did something rare. He publicly apologized. Standing before a cluster of news cameras outside the auditorium, he formally acknowledged Ethan's invaluable contribution. Mr. Miller's extraordinary talent brought to light a criminal enterprise that has operated undetected for far too long, he stated, his voice ringing with a newfound respect. His innovation has shown us a new path forward. We were wrong to underestimate the power of technology in modern law enforcement. He committed to overhauling police procedures, proposing a new digital forensics unit, and actively seeking Ethan's expertise. Ethan, now revered, found a quiet sense of calm settling over him in the days that followed. The chaos had receded, replaced by a profound sense of vindication and a myriad of unexpected opportunities. He was flooded with offers, full scholarships from prestigious universities across the country, lucrative job offers from tech giants like Google and Apple, and even a significant investment proposal for Viridian from a venture capital firm eager to capitalize on its groundbreaking potential. Yet amidst the whirlwind, Ethan made a surprising choice. He chose to remain in Willow Creek. He accepted a specialized high-level position as a chief algorithm architect for the city's newly established Smart City Initiative, working directly with Lieutenant Davies, who had become his most ardent supporter. This role wasn't just a job, it was an opportunity to apply his genius for the greater good of his community. It allowed him to further develop Viridian, not for corporate profit, but for public safety, urban planning, and, critically, for tracking and preventing cybercrime. He saw the potential to build a truly ethical and transparent digital infrastructure for his hometown, a direct antidote to the corruption he had just exposed. One quiet afternoon, after the flurry of interviews and official statements had died down, Ethan found himself sitting with Ms. Albright in her familiar, quiet computer science classroom. The faint scent of old textbooks and dust motes dancing in the sunlight filtering through the window was a comforting presence, a nostalgic echo of his years as an invisible student. "It feels different," Ethan mused, looking out the window at the setting sun casting long shadows across the empty school grounds. All that time, building Viridian in secret, thinking it was just my private world, something I kept hidden away. And now, it's out there. Everyone knows. He traced the rim of a coffee mug, a subtle hesitation in his voice. "Sometimes I still feel that old fear, that impulse to just disappear again." Ms. Albright smiled, a gentle, knowing warmth in her eyes. She always understood. "Your world always had the potential to be magnificent, Ethan," she said softly, her voice a soothing balm. "You just needed the right catalyst. And sometimes," she added, her gaze thoughtful as she looked at the whiteboard covered in erased equations, "the greatest strength comes not from hiding your light, but from letting it shine, even when others try to dim it. You proved that silence isn't weakness, but a reservoir of power waiting to be unleashed. You didn't just expose a crime, Ethan. You ignited a revelation. You showed everyone that true power lies not in manipulation or intimidation, but in truth, and in the quiet brilliance of those brave enough to reveal it." Ethan looked at her, a genuine smile spreading across his face, a rare sight that transformed his features. He realized she was right. His journey from an invisible nerd to a public hero had been forced upon him, but it had also set him free. He had found his voice, not in words, but in the eloquent logic of his code. He had emerged from the storm not unscathed, but undeniably stronger, armed with a purpose far grander than he had ever imagined possible. The quiet calm was a new beginning, a foundation for a future where his talent could truly make a difference. Willow Creek had undergone a quiet yet profound metamorphosis. It was no longer just a sleepy suburban town overshadowed by the fleeting dramas of high school. It had blossomed into a beacon of ethical innovation and community-driven progress. Its economy, once prone to the hidden manipulations of figures like Mr. Thorne, now flourished on principles of transparency and trust, a direct and undeniable result of the comprehensive cleanup and rebuilding that had followed Ethan's pivotal revelation. The city had embraced technology, not as a tool for surveillance or control, but as a means to foster genuine connection and enhance the lives of its citizens. Ethan Thorne, now 26, walked through the revitalized downtown, a figure of quiet reverence. The once invisible nerd was now a globally recognized authority in ethical AI and urban data management, yet he remained remarkably humble, his unassuming demeanor a stark contrast to the colossal impact of his work. His Viridian system, no longer a secret project in a cramped bedroom, had evolved into a sophisticated, multifaceted platform. It was now globally recognized, adopted by cities across continents as the gold standard for ethical data management, smart urban planning, and, critically, for tracking and preventing cybercrime. Viridian wasn't just code. It was a philosophy, a testament to the idea that technology, when wielded with integrity, could be a powerful force for good. He lived in a comfortable, modern loft overlooking the city's green spaces, minimalist yet filled with the warm, natural light that streamed through large windows. The chaotic wires and mismatched monitors of his high school setup had been replaced by sleek, integrated systems, but the core essence of his dedication remained. He still coded, sometimes late into the night, the elegant logic of algorithms his enduring comfort. Yet, his primary focus had shifted to strategic oversight and, more importantly, to mentorship. He was sought after by city officials, tech leaders, and even former skeptics who now eagerly sought his counsel, their past doubts erased by the undeniable success of Willow Creek. His once slight frame had filled out, and his quiet confidence shone through, replacing any lingering awkwardness. He moved with a newfound grace, the certainty of his purpose radiating from him. The commitment to paying it forward was etched into the very fabric of Ethan's new life. He had established the Viridian Initiative, a global nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering digital literacy and ethical AI development in underserved communities worldwide. He personally led workshops and mentorship programs, traveling to impoverished neighborhoods and remote villages, his mission clear: to empower the next generation. He particularly focused on at-risk youth and individuals from marginalized backgrounds, those who, like him, might have been dismissed or overlooked. He taught them not just the intricate syntax of coding, but the profound responsibility of data ethics, the power of technology as a tool for liberation, and the critical importance of using their skills to build a better, more just world. He emphasized that true innovation came from diverse perspectives, that every voice had value, and that technology should be a tool for empowerment, not control or manipulation. He also ensured his roots were never forgotten. At Northwood High, a new tradition had taken hold: the Albright Scholarship. Funded entirely by Ethan, it was a full scholarship designed to support aspiring young programmers, especially those from challenging financial backgrounds. It ensured that talent, regardless of circumstance, would always find its path, a quiet, enduring nod to the teacher who had seen his potential, believed in his light, and subtly guided him when no one else would. The story culminated on a warm summer evening in Willow Creek Park, a sprawling green oasis that had been revitalized with new, interactive digital art installations, subtly powered and protected by Viridian. The park hummed with life, filled with families, friends, and the laughter of children. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the meticulously manicured lawns. Ethan paused by a central fountain, its waters shimmering with projected light patterns. These weren't random designs. They were intricate, flowing lines of code, constantly shifting and reforming, subtly spelling out messages of unity, innovation, and progress in luminous script. He watched, a serene smile on his face, as a group of diverse teenagers, some of them former students from his Viridian Initiative workshops, gathered nearby. They were laughing, animated, collaborating on a new augmented reality game within the park, their faces illuminated by the soft, ethereal glow of their tablets. They were designing, coding, creating, their young minds alight with shared purpose. One of them, a bright-eyed girl named Lena, who had overcome significant hardship to attend Ethan's program, looked up. She saw him, and a shy, respectful nod passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of mentor and protege, of inspiration and inspired. Ethan nodded back, his smile widening. He was no longer defined by the bullies, or by the public humiliation they had inflicted. He was defined by the extraordinary impact of his hidden talents, now openly shared, transforming the world. One elegant line of code, one ethical choice, one inspired life at a time. The echoes of his past humiliation had been replaced by the harmonious hum of a thriving, connected community, a true digital spring. The light always finds a path, even in the deepest darkness, and courage can indeed alter destinies. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey.